Welcome everybody. Good to see you here, whether you're a regular or a newcomer. Um, we always get a nice bunch of people, which we obviously have tonight. And a little later, I'll introduce our speaker, Laura Mobini, who will talk about advancing social cohesion and inclusion in Australia. Meanwhile, just to introduce the proceedings, we're meeting to contribute to build a better world. If you could just be muted when you're not speaking, but just raise your hand later during the discussion if you'd like to make a comment or a question. And as per these principles of interfaith dialogue, the primary purpose is to learn. So even though we always, each of us has something interesting and even important to say, we talk one at a time and we learn from the presenter. So that's our main aim, to learn. And we often remind ourselves of this guidance from the Universal House of Justice: whether through deeds or words, the merit of your every contribution to social well-being lies first in your resolute commitment to discover that precious point of unity, where contrasting perspectives overlap and around which contending peoples can coalesce. So some kinds of dialogue, you start by looking for differences and trying to resolve them. That can work, but it seems to be much more effective if we look for points of unity to start with. So we've allocated readings, and before we start the music, I'd just like to ask Tracy to acknowledge country.
Thank you. In Australia, we all live on different Aboriginal Peoples Nations country, and they have been custodians of that country for thousands of generations. I live on Worimi Peoples country, up here north of Newcastle, and we want to pay our respect to the elders past and present, who have been very obedient in taking instructions from their creator to be good custodians of the natural world and all the people living there, and having ceremonies and finding different ways to take care of each other and the land. And in Sydney at the moment, we're all in shock about what happened on Sunday in Bondi, where hate really came through. And on Monday night in Sydney Hyde Park, an Aboriginal elder hosted a smoking ceremony to help in the grieving process, and had invited a rabbi and imam to meet in the middle, and they embraced each other, affirming that we are brothers. And but that ceremony that's been done thousands of years to resolve conflict, even once again on Monday night, was used for something we're all coming to terms with. So we just want to acknowledge that that is a living energy here, and it's thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Just got to get this going smoothly.
Sometimes the right way is right under your nose. Just a tiny shift of your thoughts take away woes. Sometimes just a smile can make a whole group stay. And lots of things you throw away go a long, long way to kuno love, to kuno love, to kuno love. Help heal this broken world. We are so many different people looking for love. We are so many different people seeking our truth. We are so many different stories with so many different hearts. 6 billion different ways to heal the world. Father called me this morning. He said, Pip, go sing your songs. This broken world we enter needs our rights to heal its wrongs. Make some music, spread some joy, shine a little light. Maybe you can mend a wound, make someone feel alright. To kuno love, to kuno love, to kuno love. Help heal this broken world. We are so many different people looking for love. We are so many different people seeking our truth. We are so many different stories with so many different hearts. 6 billion different ways to heal the world. To kuno love, to kuno love, to kuno love. Help heal this broken world. To kuno love, to kuno love, to kuno love. Help heal this broken world. Kuno love. Father called me this morning. He said, Pip, go sing your songs.
Meditation is greater than thought. The earth seems to meditate. Atmosphere and sky seem to meditate. The waters and mountains seem to meditate, as do gods and men, while small men are quarrelsome, slanderous gossips. The great may be said to have received their due portion of the fruits of meditation. Revere meditation, Hindu writings, Chandogai.
O Ahura, Matha, and Asha, bestow upon them Zarathustra and his followers spiritual strength and power. O Wohuman, grant mental power, cleverness, and full wisdom to Zarathustra, so that he may lead the world to peace and rest. O Mother, we all recognize him as thy noble son and best of creation, and accept him as our best leader. Zoroastrian writings.
Meditation brings wisdom. Lack of meditation is folly. These are the two roads, one leading forward, one backwards. Choose the right one, the one that leads to wisdom. Buddhist writings.
Happy is the man that hath not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the way of the sinners, nor sat in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by streams of water, that bringeth forth its fruit in its season, and whose leaf doth not wither. And in whatsoever he doeth, he shall prosper. Jewish writings.
And he said, Whereunto shall we liken the kingdom of God? Or with what comparison shall we compare it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which, when it is sown in the earth, is less than all the seeds that be in the earth. But when it is sown, it groweth up, and becometh greater than all herbs, and shooteth out great branches, so that the fowls of the air may lodge under the shadow of it. Christian writings.
A blessed book have we sent down to thee, that men may meditate its verses, and that those endued with understanding may bear it in mind. Each had a succession of angels before him and behind him, who watch over him by God's behest. Verily, God will not charge his gifts to men, till they change what is in themselves. Islamic writing.
Meditate profoundly, that the secret thing of things unseen may be revealed unto you, that you may inhale the sweetness of a spiritual and imperishable fragrance, and that you may acknowledge the truth that from the time immemorial even unto eternity, the Almighty had tried and will continue to try his servants, so that light may be distinguished from darkness, truth from falsehood, right from wrong, guidance from error, happiness from misery, and roses from thorns. Baha'i writings.
is peace. You can taste it if you try. Can embrace it if you try. There is love. You can live it if you try. You can give it if you try. People walk this earth, people rush around, but there is no rest till their hearts bow down. There is a dream, you can reach it if you try. You can make it if you try. There is a God. You can know him if you try. You can approach him if you try. There are angels. They are with you day and night. You can know them if you try. I have searched this world, I have seen the signs, but I will not rest till I pass the line. There is heaven, you can know it if you try. You can go there if you try. And if God wills, it will be.
Thank you very much to the readers. And now my very great pleasure to introduce our presenter for tonight, Laura. Laura Mabini Keshe went through her time at Australian National University Law School with a burning interest in human rights and development studies. She graduated with a Bachelor of Laws with first-class honours and a Bachelor of Development Studies. While studying, her volunteer service included 2 years on the ACT Multicultural Advisory Council, Regional Coordinator for the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program in Southeastern Australia, and involvement in Indonesia-Australia Youth Dialogue. Laura is currently a part-time law clerk with the Australian Government Solicitor, and in her spare time she supports the Baha'i Office of External Affairs. And in September 2025, Laura participated in the National Social Cohesion and Inclusion Conference organised by the Baha'i community. And so Laura will be talking to us about advancing social cohesion and inclusion in Australia, some recent initiatives by the Australian Baha'i community. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you for that introduction. I must say it's the first time I think I've ever had my bio read out before I said something, and it's a slightly unnerving feeling, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And thank you all for having me join you in this gathering. I apologize that I don't know what topics you've already covered, so I can't connect back, but hopefully what I share will resonate nonetheless. Can I just make sure everyone can hear me okay? Is the sound coming through clearly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, I guess I wanted to start by sharing that I'm speaking to you all today from the Ngunnawal country, the Australian Capital Territory in Canberra, and pay my deep respects to the Ngunnawal people, as Tracy put so beautifully, for I guess the years and years that they've spent caring for this land, caring for each other, building community, not just with themselves, but also with the natural world. I was lucky enough to go and look at some Ngunnawal rock art the other month, and one thing that struck me is that it's never just about people. It's always about how people are integrated and coherent with the world around them. And I think that ties in really nicely to our topic for today, though I will be focusing mostly on human society. Um, I will share just a little bit about, I guess, mostly a personal view of social cohesion in Australia today and how that discourse is kind of being shaped. And I will share also a little bit about what the High Office for External Affairs in Australia has been doing in recent times to the best of my abilities. But as I said, I'm not working full time for the office at the moment. So just know that whatever they're doing is probably infinitely better than I'm describing right now. But thank you all for having me. I'm just going to try to share my screen, get a PowerPoint up. I'm hoping to make this somewhat interactive. So I'm not sure if that's the usual approach, but feel free if you have questions in the middle to put a hand up or interrupt. And there might be times when I ask for contributions. If that turns out not to be something that people enjoy, then we can skip over it. But we will see how we go. Okay, well, without further ado, social cohesion. I guess this is a Baha'i perspective, but also looking at Australia more broadly. So social cohesion is kind of one of those terms that defies definition. It's used in various ways by different groups of people, and it has different implications for different groups of people. So I've put a few different ones up. This democratic resilience, this is from the Australian government. Our Home Affairs Department has a office dedicated to social cohesion. And while they don't even attempt to define it on their website, they do link it closely with democratic resilience. So from a government perspective, the value in social cohesion is that it brings a strong democracy and it helps maintain security in our society. And I think all of us can see the effects of disunity and a lack of social cohesion in Australia this week, perhaps more so than ever. But from another perspective, social cohesion is about peace and harmony and living together with your neighbors, being united, um, and being able to navigate difference, I suppose, in your society. But social cohesion also has a long history of political use in Australia, and Australia has a long history of using its policies to kind of force assimilation and sameness across the population. So sometimes when people hear social cohesion, they think of governments trying to control people to make them all fit one model of what it means to be Australian. And then you've got ideas of, social cohesion means everyone has rights and everyone has freedom and everyone is treated the same in society. And that's how we integrate. We're all one. And so we're all under the rule of law and we treat each other equally. But it also then embraces concepts of diversity, that we're a multicultural country, that everyone is different. So I hope it's starting to become clear that social cohesion can mean a lot of different things, and depending on where you say it and who you say it to, it's a weighty term. But I think what we're trying to do, not just as a Baha'i community, but as a society, is work towards an understanding of what we want social cohesion to mean for Australia, what we want it to look like, and oh dear, I've missed a few. There we go. And how we should work towards it. So I thought I would just put the question to you all about, I suppose, why social cohesion was chosen for today, why we think it's so prevalent at the moment. Maybe if we can collectively come up with 3 or 5 trends or issues in society that are contributing to this really deep interest in social cohesion. So if you have a thought, feel free to just unmute or put it in the chat. It doesn't also have to apply to Australia if there are those from overseas.
It's really you're sort of navigating that diversity with the oneness. You know, how do we recognize that we have so much more in common while celebrating that we do have differences, and how can we do it in a harmonious way, a sort of respectful way? How do we channel out that respect? But at the same time, this week it's made obvious it just takes a couple of people not in the same space of thinking to cause a lot of trouble and pain, you know, for families, but also just for that social cohesion. So
I guess humanity has reached to a point where contact has become so easy between people from all over the world. And because of past history, there's differences. Now we have reached to a point where unity is important. And so the social cohesion problem or concept has become important in everybody's mind.
I think also at different times, different groups seem to come under attack and feel themselves to be under attack, probably because they are. You know, sometimes it's the Muslims, sometimes it's indigenous, sometimes Jewish, sometimes Indian, and it just changes. Whoever seems like an easy group to blame for whatever problem is happening in Australia or somewhere in the world.
I think at the moment we talk about social cohesion, we need to divert it and change its direction. There's nothing wrong with social cohesion because that's a natural like feeling from people were born. They're supposed to be bonding together, love each other, and harmony and everything, just like Adam and Eve in the Bible. But the people who inject the term of discourse into the context of social cohesion, just like if you teach the children and then you talk about social cohesion, then you just give them the question like this, discourse. It means you inject the idea of discourse into their brain. So it's all, you think about it. We can teach children a different way. We don't have to instill or incite them into the idea of discourse because we're the one who did it, not anybody else. So if you think about business analysts, that's how they see the matter. Just like the language is so complication, you know. Social, people are social. They're okay, they're happy. But cohesion, we have to analyze it. You know why we have a problem with unity? Why don't we call it unity? Why we have to divide it into like 10 different meanings? But when we talk to the kids, what sort of meaning now we talk to the kids? They will be confused.
Laura, can I just ask, what does the word discourse mean? Is it something like discord?
Yeah, no, discourse, in this sense, I'm using it to describe, I guess, a sort of formal conversation that's not going on between two people, but that's happening across a society. So, for example, a discourse might be about the equality of men and women. It doesn't just happen in one place at one time, but it's a theme that is talked about across a society and then, I guess, changes and evolves in a collective sense. But I think, I don't know if it's Jung or Young. I think my understanding of what you're saying is that it kind of seems like an academic way of talking about a topic that could also be talked about very simply using language like unity and stuff that is, I guess, more palatable to people's hearts rather than their minds. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting.
Well, you see, with the word, what I'm saying is social cohesion. If you study language, you divide it in two meanings. Social, socializing. Everybody okay with socializing. They come together for barbecue, no problem. But cohesion, and then you analyze that one into harmony, sameness, control, liberty, diversity, development, control, peace. I mean, a little kid, 7 years old, if you talk all this and you talk about this course, you confuse them. Okay, too much information. So you have to cut it down, streamline.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because it's a, I guess, interesting aspect of the work that the Baha'i community is doing in the external affairs space, in the sense that for those who are familiar with the Baha'i community and the people in it, we're trying to make a difference on a lot of levels. One being, like Usha is saying, on a personal level, you have conversations with your neighbors and you generate social cohesion like this. But on a formal level, in terms of our relationship with governments and different institutions, the Baha'i community operates more formally. And so when I'm saying I'm talking on behalf of the Office of External Affairs, it's a kind of a team of people across Australia who is trying to think about how we can make a formal contribution at the formal space. So even though as a Baha'i community, social cohesion is probably not the word that we would use to describe what we're aiming for here. We would use something like unity or oneness because that for Baha'i comes with a lot of different values and principles and we understand it. But I guess why I'm talking about social cohesion in this presentation is because we need to be able to use the language that the social actors we're talking to are using. So at the national level, we use social cohesion because that's what government understands and that's what institutions understand. But you're absolutely right. If we're talking in our communities, with our friends and our families and our children, we would probably use very different language to unpack this topic. And I'll go into later kind of how the Baha'i community is trying to harmonize these two and work towards a more cohesive vision of what we're doing. But I think that's a good starting point in general. You guys talked about the fact that Australia's got this juggling act between diversity and oneness. We're in a time in history where humanity has an unprecedented level of contact with everyone in the world, not just people who share your cultural or ethnic or religious background. And because of this, we need to learn new skills, which is how you live with people who you don't share a common culture or a common religion with. And I guess it's an old challenge in many ways, but the scale on which it's happening across Australia and across the world is something very new.
Yeah,
and
but
exciting.
You remind me of the parties we run here. We had Liberal, we had Labor, right? Coalition, National, and Green, and all that. So if you talk about democratic, whatever, it's only minor. With a chance in a parliament house, I think. I guess so. Because if you just go through the election for the last few months and or last year or whatever, you see majority is the the Labor and Liberal, the two major parties, and then the Green, and then the Independent, and then Coalition and National. Okay, when you talk about democratic, it's more like, for me, or some people study American politics, that it's more like American politics, republic, whatever, and then democratic over there, if you study American politics.
Yeah, the division across political lines is another, I guess, really there's a lot of tension, I suppose, in that space, which is also causing social cohesion issues. But I guess we're taking a more broad view. I might just keep going if that's okay with everyone.
Thanks, Laura.
So there are some people have attempted to define it. The Scanlon Foundation is an Australian institute that's been operating since 2001, that's been trying to study and understand what it means to have an Australian society that works together. And they've identified 5 different elements, one being how you feel you belong and whether you feel pride in, I guess they phrased it in like pride in your country, whether you have a sense of worth, and they say you need a baseline of kind of financial stability to feel like you belong and there's social cohesion. Social justice and equality, I guess that's about how you perceive the law to treat you and whether the government treats you fairly or not. Participation, and they emphasize your political participation, empowerment, and then acceptance and rejection. So it's quite a legalistic, I think, definition of social cohesion. It's very based on people's relationship to the state. I would question whether that's, I mean, necessarily all there is to it. And I think that's why the Baha'i community is trying to talk to a lot of different people to kind of see how do people perceive Australia and their belonging in it, and what does that mean for our social cohesion journey as a nation. So the recent projects that the Baha'i community is doing, one is it's currently a 5-year-long project called Creating an Inclusive Narrative, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, so I apologize if I'm repeating anything. But the idea behind the Creating an Inclusive Narrative project was that, and this is in my words, not the words of the office, but what it means to be Australian is a question that's not very easy to answer. We're such a diverse country. We're also kind of taught that Australia doesn't, at least my generation, a lot of people perceive Australia as not having a national culture, which I don't think is true, but the West kind of often portrays itself as acultural. So I think that's a result of that. And this project was trying to get people together from all different walks of life to talk about, well, what is our society like in Australia? Where are we at? Where are we going? And how do we want to talk about ourselves as a country? And so social cohesion and inclusion was the underlying theme of that process. And in 2020 and across maybe 2021 as well, the Baha'i community hosted a series of roundtables in various cities and towns, and then collated the discussions that everyone had had and brought together this Creating an Inclusive Narrative document, which is available online. I think if you just Google Creating an Inclusive Narrative Baha'i, you can have a read. It's a really beautiful document, and it summarizes, I guess, what people's perceptions of that were. And it was a really interesting time as well. You know, during the pandemic, people were really thinking about, well, what do we do when we're in crisis? How do we rely on each other? How can we restructure our society so that we can live through disasters? So it's an interesting read. And now 5 years on, the world has changed a lot in many different ways. New conflicts have arisen, new, I guess, political lines have deepened. The political spectrum has arguably disappeared altogether, but if it is still there, it's gotten further polarized. And so the new Creative and Inclusive Narrative Update project is currently ongoing. And if you're interested, you can participate in roundtables near you. There is I can share with Colin, I think, a registration if you want to have these discussions and get involved. So this is kind of the ongoing project the Baha'i Office of External Affairs is undertaking to track changes and to build more and more understanding and shared language around where are we going as a nation, how are we advancing, and how are we doing it in a way that's unified and brings everyone along and empowers everyone. And now this year, this year and the last few years, to do this on a kind of more formal scale, the Baha'i community hosted a national conference on social cohesion and inclusion. And by hosted, I don't mean like it was within the Baha'i community, but we organized the venue, reached out to institutions and organized the speakers, but it was attended by a range of stakeholders across government in various departments, policing. A lot of local council members came and were very interested, some state government people, and then also NGOs and institutions who are working in this social cohesion space. And I was lucky enough to attend. It was very interesting, a very diverse group of people, but to have everyone in the same place thinking about society and their communities in this way was really motivating. So I thought I would try to give a summary as best as I can, and hopefully that's of some interest, and perhaps we can discuss after. So the conference this year talked about 4 themes. The first was focused on dialogue, and it was run by the CEO of Welcoming Cities, Aleem Ali. Now, Welcoming Cities is a really interesting, I guess, institute that's been operating in Australia for a while now. And to put it very roughly, it kind of aims to create metrics for cities and towns to assess how welcoming they are, how able they are to receive people that are different or people that are migrants and integrate them meaningfully into their communities. And they have many, many local councils and cities signed up to their project and are progressing along their continuum. He was a very engaging speaker, and he focused on a lot on the fact that it seems like in Australia, more and more people are having difficulty having civil conversations with people they disagree with on various political issues. And he pointed out that really, if you can't have a conversation with someone you're different to or have different beliefs to, you cannot have a cohesive society and you cannot move forward together as a nation. And so he was emphasizing the need to learn how to have constructive disagreement and brave conversations and be willing to see a person beyond their opinion that you disagree with, to see that there's someone beyond an opinion that you still want to be able to have a relationship with and coexist with, even if you have some sort of disagreement. So that was really interesting. And following his presentation, there was group discussions across a range of tables and different stakeholders about that theme. And I was very fortunate. I was on a table with some staff working for local councils and also a member of the AFP, and they were sharing about their attempts to organize different initiatives and programs. For example, the constable was talking about how they wanted to try to have a conversation between young people. I think the idea was young men, to talk about young men with very different political opinions on the war in Gaza and what's happening there. And he was sharing about how they know that people need to be able to talk about this, but they're very scared to even put them in the same room and they don't know how to go about it. And the local councils were sharing similar things. So it was a really interesting insight into the difficulties people are having in having tough conversations, but also the fact that people know that it's something we need to work towards. The second session was about integrating First Nations perspectives into this process, and we had a Wiradjuri woman and local councillor for Sydney, Yvonne Weldon, speak to us, which was really lovely, and share about her family background and their journey, and emphasizing the importance of learning from, I guess, First Nations knowledges and cultures, and integrating those practices of storytelling and of realizing who you are and being able to share that with others, and also being able to hear who they are and be okay with it and move on. So that was really enlightening as well. And then as the day went on, we kind of got more and more of a local focus. So moving from kind of national themes and issues to practical challenges. And we had a look at communities and the role of community groups, whether it be religious groups, ethnic groups, sporting groups, the community of people who like to knit, whatever it is, but the role of community in building belonging and purpose and having cohesion, I suppose, together. And the conference finished off by focusing on local neighborhoods, both as the place where lack of social cohesion is most keenly felt, but also the place where the most learning and transformation can happen. And in that session, the CEO of the Scanlon Foundation that I mentioned earlier spoke and presented the statistics of 2025 on how they've been tracking social cohesion and painted a picture which was both, on one hand, reassuring. She said overall, people's perceptions of social cohesion in Australia haven't dropped drastically, but there are key areas where there's a lot of struggle and tension. And as Tracy said, one or two people can really disrupt people's perceptions of social cohesion. Though at the same time, I think we have to acknowledge that in times of crisis like this, Australia is very good at rallying together and the responses, at least that I've seen, to the crisis and the tragedy that happened in Bondi have been overwhelmingly constructive and positive. Well, there are odd ones, but maybe I'm just focusing on the constructive ones. And before I let other people speak and ask some questions, I wanted to focus a little bit on neighborhoods, and what neighborhoods mean in the grand scheme of social cohesion in Australia. Sorry, I'm a little bit unwell. So we had a panel of people who were working really closely in their neighborhoods, and we heard some really beautiful stories about the initiatives they were taking in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, I believe, just by reaching out to neighbors and having people over for dinner and starting to talk about building a neighborhood. They were really seeing transformative effects for them, for the younger generations, and for the older generations. So I thought I would read out this quote, which is from Creating an Inclusive Narrative, the original document that was made following the 2020 to 2021 dialogues. The conclusion that was come to was that it's in neighborhoods that intensive learning about social cohesion can take place and be sustained. It is in the shared space where diverse individuals have the opportunity to come together to draw on the intergenerational, intercultural, and interfaith wisdom and the range of experiences, skills, and talents they all possess. All share a common social reality, and all can make small but meaningful contributions to social change. And I thought that neighborhoods is a perfect topic to end on, because it's also where I guess the Baha'i community draws a lot of their learning. And so when the Office of External Affairs engages in a national space, they're aiming, well, one, to kind of help the dialogue by putting forward some Baha'i principles, the universal principles like oneness, like being able to consult, but as well as offering principles, the Office of External Affairs offers insights drawn from the activities of Baha'is, their friends, their families, their neighbors, and other well-wishers in the local communities. So it's because we're learning in our local neighborhoods that we're able to make a meaningful contribution all the way up to the national level. And there's no point talking about social cohesion if you're not trying to do something in your own life. So I thought I would end with some pictures from my own neighborhood where we're trying to learn about social cohesion by bringing together and having classes for children, engaging the younger youth between 12 and 15 and taking them through that journey through, I guess now it's going to be through their separation or otherwise from social media and how that goes. And like we said at the start, trying to instill not the words necessarily, but the values of social cohesion in the next generation in the community and help them to, I guess, take a step forward beyond where we've taken Australia today. So I hope that that's provided some kind of insight for everyone. If there are any questions or you'd like to take the conversation in a different direction, please let me know. I'll stop screen sharing now and just open the floor. Okay, first question, Colin. Yep, by all means.
I just want to make sure I could thank you for the presentation before anyone else got in first. So
oh, thank you.
Really, that was very nice, very wonderful introduction to the subject and very clear insight into the flavour of the conference, which was a few months ago. And while other people are thinking of their comments or questions and raising their hands, you reminded me towards the end there about the contrast between the discourse or the dialogue or the conversation at the neighbourhood compared to at a national level, because at the national level it tends to be played out through the media and social media, and it's not very personal. It just it doesn't really resolve problems. Possibly it hardens the divisions. I'm not sure. Not necessarily, but anyway, you can see the challenges going on. But at the local level, we've experienced it, Jung and I and others in our street. We've got a Muslim household, Catholic, Jewish, and Baha'i, and we got together and provided children's activities, sort of a spiritual and moral education, just some very simple classes for the school holidays. And it was simple because we all had that common interest in the well-being of our children, upbringing of our children. We didn't need to talk about religious differences because we're basically friends. And even just organizing the activity created some of those friendships. You know, after 10 years or so, we're still waving at each other across the street and saying hello. Jung, you're next, and others, please please raise your hands if you'd like to comment.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Laura. I know there are some experts in this panel that know about child protection policy. You've been mentioned a lot about the incident happened in the weekend at Bondi. I just want to know, well, I'm a Catholic, right? So I'm talking about if you are an educator and you know so much more about child protection policy in your area, the communication, the sharing ideas, and now you talk about to connect with the neighbor. I just want to know how much extension or expansion that your informative child protection policy has been going for the last 2 or 3 years, because social media have been criticized a lot about, you know, children protection and in child care center and anywhere. And then obviously, if we are the light, or you think you are the light, you're supposed to shed the light to other groups, not only our group. We protect other groups and other children, not only our own. So how much expansion have we been doing? How much development in policies and modify the policies of the law, whatever, that you've been doing, or you've been helping to develop? Implementation, I can see the strategy is there, but how we follow up with the operations and the implementations and how successful it's been, because in the social media and newspaper, they said a lot of things happening have been gone backwards, not forward, not advancing. It's go backwards. So we in the law, we in the policy, we modify policy. Have we done anything? I mean, I know we've done a lot of things, but then you have to be clear with the kids, the children.
Yeah, thanks for that. I can't really speak to state or federal legislation and how that policy has been involved. My law background is constitutional law, so I'm unfortunately not kind of up to date with practical developments in the law around child safety policy, but I can share very briefly what the Baha'i community is trying to do to make sure that we're practicing child safe procedures as much as possible when engaging with the community. And that is not just following the legal regime that the Australian government is developing, but also as a community coming up with our own training that we do for anyone who wants to be involved in community building activities, whether it be myself, or a Baha'i, someone who's Hindu, someone who's Christian, whoever it is, or atheist, agnostic. If they want to help by running activities with children and participating in the community, we offer this additional child safety training, which looks at kind of the spiritual foundations for caring for children and the responsibilities that the community has to protect them and nourish them and help them grow, but also risk management strategies and awareness of reporting requirements. So as much as possible, we're trying to go above and beyond, but it's still something that we're learning about as a community in our local areas and as a faith community. And I hope that it's something that the government can also develop some better approaches to as well. But yeah, thank you for the question.
And the other notion, I just want to remind you quickly, some of your writing, I just make a quick note because, I just say, as we move forward, and then ... I didn't clip everything. Work that path together. Okay? So what you're saying, we develop social cohesion, same values, understanding, communication, all that, good. And then we work that path together. I mean, in military, we don't work in the same path together. We got to have backup. We have to have north, south, east, west path. Because if you work on the same path together, you move forward, nobody look after you at the backside. So I'm talking about military strategy here and tactics.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll address that quickly before we go on to Tracy's question. I think you're referring to the quote that was from the session about the First Nations perspectives. And I think it was more a symbolic of concept, walking the path together. The councillor, Yvonne, was talking about how if Australia wants to become more united as a community across differences, we need to develop a shared idea of where we want to go as a country and try to travel that journey of development together. Although everyone is going to take their own path in terms of their contribution to the society, we need to know which direction we're going, and the journey has to be one that we take together if we want to do it in a coherent way and not leave people behind. But thank you. Thank you for the question. Tracy, would you like to ask
You
one?
go deep. When you keep clicking there, when people go in deep.
Tracy, your turn.
Okay. I just governments can do so much, legislation can do so much. I'm not a Baha'i, but I really appreciate the fact that the Baha'is took the initiative to organise people coming together to make a vision for the country. Because, Noel Pearson made his, thing of the 3 layers of how Australia is, the thousands of years of First Peoples habitation and their traditions, variety of traditions, then the British laws, and then multicultural Australia coming. So, and in my mind, I really think we need to make some sort of image, some vision, some image that the average person could feel like, oh yeah, I can understand that and I could contribute. Like sometimes I think of it, Australia's like a tree, the First Peoples is like the root, and other things have been engrafted because in comparison for the time of the first people, modern Australia is very new. Like the last week in the calendar year, so to speak, relatively speaking. And so, but and I've put it out to a few friends of mine, what image can we make, better than my sort of tree idea, that the average person can feel like, yes, I am part of that and I want to make it better. And even the first song that Colin chose to play tonight, while that was recording, I looked up what the Tikkun Olam means. I'd never heard of that term before, but I thought, wow, what an incredible contribution of Jewish thinking to that everyone has got a part to play. So trying to think about how everyone can feel like I've got something to contribute, how we can have that type of conversation, like market. Advertisers always have a good logo, a good picture that moves people on. We need a different story, not the white Australia story, to really go forward as a collective people. So I'm just I'd like your thoughts on what type of vision that we could, you know, get inspired by as a bigger picture.
Well, that's absolutely the question. I mean, and I think the difficulty is it's not one that any one person can generate. I mean, there were times in human history where revolutions were led by a few, but now, I mean, we have unprecedented levels of literacy rate, unprecedented levels of ability to communicate. And if we want any kind of meaningful transformation, it has to be one that people can get on board with and take ownership for themselves. And so I guess that's why, even though it's a modest contribution, the Baha'i community is trying to organize and hear everyone's thoughts and try to start compiling them so we can work on building something bit by bit. And it's every conversation we have with our neighbors and our friends and our families, and whether we can create larger spaces to start to get this going. I really did. I like the tree analogy. I think that was really beautiful. And I think probably if there were more structures in place for listening to First Nations peoples, there's probably an analogy or a wisdom that would be really apt and that we could draw from and learn from. But as you were talking, I was thinking, when you were talking about, we need something, a shared vision. My first thought was that the song, we are one, yet we are many. But then it says we share a dream and sing with one voice. But then what dream do we share actually?
Exactly.
So it's a kind of a dead end song. So I totally agree with you that we need something, and I think it has to be probably, if anything is going to do it, it's going to be people's greater and greater appreciation for our oneness with our natural environment, whether it be like you view it as God's creation, whether you view it as simply like the source of all of our life and of our power, and something that we're destroying. If we don't, as a society, really deepen our understanding and appreciation for our oneness as a people and as a planet, then I guess we're going to hurtle off into ruin. So if I had to pick something that would kickstart that narrative building process, that's what I would pick. But who knows? Hopefully, I'll reread maybe the Inclusive Narrative Project. I'll send the link here, and we'll see what they come up with in the next round and build on it from there. Thank you. I'll be thinking about that tonight.
Thank you.
Ahmed.
Yeah, that was a very nice talk. I'm just thinking of the issues that are confronted by people of Australia. They're not very different from the issues that people all over the world are confronting. So, humanity has reached to a point where the issues have become worldwide. The environmental problems, equality of men and women, and things like that, service to the whole humanity. So I'm wondering, from what I look, is that, if you look at what happened on Sunday, two people caused so much havoc that even it went all over the world. The news of it, the actions, the conversations that went through, it went all over the world. So we're living in a place where the whole world is a village now. I'm wondering about the concept of neighborhood that the Baha'is have initiated. My view is that you need a central few people that can initiate it and run it. And I'm wondering whether having this as a Baha'i concept might go further, and people all over the world would grab it and initiate more of these conversations. So is there potential for that? Is there potential for this to go worldwide? Because, this concept is being run by Baha'is worldwide.
I think so. So is my understanding correct? You're kind of asking this idea of neighborhoods, and that to start transformation in the neighborhood, you start with a few people and you build from there. Does that have scope to spread?
But the first thing is that there is a need for a nucleus for it to flourish, wherever it is. The second thing is whether it will spread and people of other faiths would pick it up and go with it.
Yeah, I think okay, so for context, in recent years, in approaching kind of being active in the neighborhoods, the Baha'i community has tried to think about the analogy of an atom, and that an atom has a nucleus of a few subatomic particles around which the electrons kind of revolve, and then to get movement happening anywhere, you need a core group of people who are committed and dedicated. And then gradually, as you befriend more people and as things start to come, more and more people will join that nucleus. The electrons will come in. It's not very chemically accurate anymore, but the electrons will come in and more people will come. And I think that's just a natural way of organizing human society and organizing action. I think probably communities everywhere are starting to do it. I feel like the real issue is the issue of motivation, and where that core group of people gets their motivation, because one human acting alone can do great things, and there are many examples in human history where one person has had the drive to transform the world around them. But in our day-to-day life, there are so many pressures weighing on us, making money, getting food, doing chores, all of these things. And especially in Australia, people are quite like careful with how they spend their time. And so I think it's more about how do you find a few like-minded people who can help you commit and who you will help commit. And then together you'll be able to find the joy of dedicating your time to like working in your neighborhood and having these conversations. And I think the source of that for the Baha'i community, part of it is like a commitment, a love for God and a love for the teachings which have the power to change the world. And I think that's shared among most religious communities. And I also think the idea of, well, we think humanity has potential to change and we care about the world around us and we care about people, and that deep care will motivate us to act, is something that also people who are agnostic or atheists can get around. It's just a matter of having those initial conversations, finding people who share those deep values and those deep commitments. And I think naturally nucleuses, as we say, will form from there. I
Because
hope that.
atoms can get together and become molecules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more and more molecules, and then finally one human body.
Okay.
Colin?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I can start to see from the things you've been saying, all the different elements which are needed. You mentioned motivation and care and working in groups. A bit earlier, you mentioned skills. I was just thinking about a concept or an image which Tracy was mentioning, was just something simple which everyone could understand. And I think just the idea of a circle is a good image, because whenever there's a football competition on, we draw a particular circle and we're in one circle, someone else is another. And then if it's competition between Melbourne and Sydney, or Australia and New Zealand, or whatever, we can draw different circles in our mind very easily and redraw them when we need to. And if we've got overlapping circles, I think that's helpful. The more overlapping circles, the better for social cohesion. But the best mental construct is perhaps a circle which embraces the whole world, all of humanity. So last week, that was Tracy's topic, our common origin. And in weeks before that, we talked about the meanings of unity. The Brahma Kumaras talked about the tree of life. So, and all of these are just a concept of oneness, the biggest kind of oneness, and it's actually the most legitimate kind of oneness, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I do think the circles are really powerful, especially since you really can't separate the question of social cohesion or unity in your society with the question of identity and how you identify yourselves. And like we've said, it's a very complex world, and we have complex layers of identity, and I might put myself in many different circles. I have the circle of, oh, I identify as a Canberran, and I identify as an Australian, and I identify as a Baha'i or as a woman, or like I could probably draw about 100 circles of different things that I identify as. But ultimately, it's a question of how I rank those circles in terms of what is most important to who I am and who I want to be. And I think you're right that we need to get to a point where our being human, a human living in a society, living in an ecosystem, and what that entails to be one human among 8 billion, or are we approaching 9? I don't even know now. And when that comes first and all the others kind of fall into place after that, that is when you get, I think, social cohesion. And when you understand that deeply, like that, well, I'm one person, humanity is one, that with that kind of implies notions of justice, and that, well, if I'm equal to, I don't know, my brother in Indonesia, I want him to prosper the same as me, and I want him to have the same opportunities as I do. And I want my, I don't know, my sister on the other side of the road who has had a completely different religion and upbringing to me. She is one with me, and I want her to thrive. I think that identity is what needs to change. And I guess going back to Tracy's question of that shared vision, what we need is a concept of Australian identity that actually has nothing to do with necessarily being Australian, because Australian means that it's a jurisdiction. But how, for the first time in human history, do we generate an identity that isn't based on your tribe or your nation or your religion? It's an exciting question.
Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting question because traditionally, if you have an enemy, then you have at least a temporary unity against an enemy. And there's always been someone you can, someone foreign. I mean, when there wasn't much travel or communication, then people from a different country were very foreign. But now it takes a step in maturity to realize that the enemy, no one is truly an enemy. I mean, sure, they can be if they're going to hurt us or try and take us over. But ultimately, the enemy is, we can't say that we're good and they're bad. There's good and bad in everyone. So I think it'll take a level of maturity to just realize that the enemy is within our prejudices.
Yeah, maturity and sacrifice, because when there becomes no them, there's only us. The enemy becomes like poverty, inequality, all of these things. But to rectify that, then the people with more like us need to sacrifice, and that's another topic of conversation. Sorry, Tracy, I think you had your hand up.
But anyway, I'll just sort of further on from that, making that what it's not what we're against or who we are against, and also putting politicians back in their place. That it's not politicians, but it's the human heart and spirit within the people. I mean, even that song, We Are Australia, that was radical in its day, because it actually included that there was people on the shore looking on those who arrived. They were included. Before that, they were not included at all. So that was sort of a shift. So it included more. So maybe that's a hint of our vision of not, and politicians always like to do that, divide and conquer for their power base. But if we have a thing of, what are we for? We're for the human heart. We're for that thriving of everybody. And it's not, nature is very abundant and generous. It's just that I play Bob Dylan a lot, And he says, it costs more to store the food than to give it away in quite a few of his songs. So, if we affirm what we want, and that's that no one is a threat to me, because it means that we're not aware of what their need is, and everybody's needs can be accommodated. There's in the conflict resolution, they use an example of an orange. One orange, but two people want it. And then they, sort of one person will say, we'll just cut it in half. Well, hang on, let's listen to what they want to use, how they want to use the orange. So one person wants the peel to make something, and another person wants the juice. So it's very simple. They can have all of the peel and all of the juice, and that's a real win-win situation. So it's really, and even with the Uluru Statement, that came out of, we have to imagine possibilities. So it's really a faithful people. We should be having bigger imaginations of what's possible for all the citizens of not only our own nation, but of the whole world. So anyway, I'll stop rabbiting on.
No, not at all. Thank you for sharing. And I love the orange story. I think it's a really beautiful one. And the question of what are we for is a good one. What are we for? Not just as an individual, not what am I for, but what are we for others? And easy to answer not easy to answer, but when you ask your neighbors that, you can start to really think there's really obvious, we're for our children growing up safe. We're for a clean neighborhood. We're for all these things. But it's interesting that you mentioned politicians, because even though we're working very hard at the grassroots, we do need to see change up top. And we're talking about the fact that we need to learn to have healthy dialogue with people who we disagree with, and yet our national parliament is an exact model of the opposite of how not to have a healthy dialogue with people we disagree with. And so perhaps when we talk about maturing as a society, a different form of politics is something that we were going to need soon too. Anyway, Young, what would you want to share?
Thank you, Tracy. Young, we have time for a short question.
Yeah, I have a very quick ideas here. Thank you. So how do we do as a nation if you want to advance or you want to create more social cohesion? Because at the moment, it looks like everything going backwards. We have housing issue, we have energy bills issue, we have education issue, training issue, everything. Just like people, that's what social media said, issues. Okay, we have to acknowledge that there's a major improvements in the last 5 or 10 years, because the idea of inclusion is not new. It's a very old concept 20, 30 years ago, but then the American people raise it up and have conference, have meeting, and people from Australia travel to America. So just what we have to do nowadays is to create wealth. From the wealth, we have a big pie, then we can cut one piece of every group, and then people will be happy because their money coming in. You can't just go around, have meeting and here and there, and transport and petrol and fuel without finance. So if I work in a finance, you know how the budget go, and therefore we have to create wealth, mean employment, housing, infrastructure. There's something practical, free bus, free train. If you can do it, human rights for the poor, cheap block of land to bury the dead. Okay, not the rich can be buried, but the poor can be buried, not in a mass grave. So that's all practical ideas to create social cohesion and happiness and harmony, and as you say, oneness. You see, if somebody lied in a marble, then the poor people can stay in a marble house too. So that is oneness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's always good, we need to remember the practical side of things, that the Scanlon Institute points out that economic prosperity and equality is a key part of social cohesion. And I guess the question of, well, what do we need to do comes down to, well, what level are you working at? And there's a lot that the government needs to do, like you said, to make sure these things can be provided. But what do we need to do as individuals if we're not in those positions of power? I think it's a question of it's a question that operates at the level of the street. What can you do on your street? And how can you do it, and how can you learn with others? Because while we talk to government and we can lobby for certain things or have constructive conversation with departments, we can't change the policy, but we can change our street.
Yeah,
Do we have time for one more?
The clean up a syringe. I saw a lot of syringes in Surrey Hills, and I saw it, and I was really frightened and terrorized. I mean, like, it was so scary, terror, you know? Syringes everywhere. And if you send a Baha'i children to go and clean up a syringe, obviously the parents have to follow them, because they might not know, they might don't wear gloves, safety clothes, and they might pick up a syringe. And who knows what in the syringe?
Yeah, thank you. Ahmed, and by the way, others, maybe from other parts of the world, I can see Val waving, so I'll put you next after Ahmed, and anyone else from different experiences in different countries, feel free to raise your hand as well. But Ahmed and then Val.
Mine is very short. I just wanted to say that about the We Are One song, that although the vision wasn't mentioned, but it's clear that let's come together, grow and prosper together. So that's the aim of prosperity. And I don't think money is the answer. It's coming together, growing together, and prosper together.
Thank you, Ahmed. Val.
Yes, thanks, Colin. I really appreciate the talk. Very interesting and productive from my perspective. More than ever, I think what's needed is innovation and ideas, how to reach the people that would be interested in supporting things that we talked about. And my research shows that Nordic countries, like they say the five or whatever, they're the most happiest in the world. And I've said this in the past. I'm sure we can learn a lot from them. What do they put it down to? How do they implement the things of this nature? That's all I wanted to say at this stage. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Val. And it's an international challenge, and it should be one that we tackle by learning from other nations as well. I 100% agree. Even as close as the Pacific, I feel like there's a lot that they're learning across the Blue Pacific region that Australia could learn a lot about, but we don't really necessarily have that attitude of learning from our own First Nations people or from the Pacific or from other countries in that matter. So yeah, it's something to work on it on that scale too. Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to thank Laura, and just to say that for myself, I feel like I picked up a lot of gems, but forgot them, so I'm going to have to listen to it again. But a lot of the little things you said there seem to come from your experience in your neighborhood, as well as participation in the conference, and perhaps a lot of thinking about the topic. But probably there must have been at least 20 very practical, simple concepts and ideas during this presentation and the consultation. So thank you very much, Laura. And I just want to ask Vasantha, do you want to say anything about when our next session is? We're taking a break.
Thank you for accepting to do the presentation in a short time. Also, we shared a lot of information. And in this conference, it's going to be every year, isn't it? The social cohesion.
Somebody, I think, Tesfai, did you want to ask something or say something?
He dropped out.
Oh, dropped out. Tesfai's from Ethiopia. He may come back.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I will stop recording now, and I think we will break for next few